Hi everyone, this is Brendan Erickson from REI Wise. Thank you very much for joining our CCIM RedX Learning Center webinar today. We are also having a special event with our CCIM chapter in Arizona, which is great. We welcome everybody out in Arizona that is at our live event. We are going to be going over the lease versus buy analysis today within REI Wise. Please know that everybody is or has been put into a listen-only mode, which will knock out any background noise. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them in to our questions dialog box. I can view those as we go through and answer them. And then we'll go through a Q&A session at the end to make sure that we answer all of your questions. On top of that, I am recording today's session, so I will be able to send a link once we host this live on the internet, so you can come back and view this at times in the future whenever you need the additional training. Okay, so on your screen now you should see the CCIM RedX Learning Center homepage, which is at ccimredxlearningcenter.com. Here you can check out any future webinar schedules, see all the great info that's coming up. You can also contact Pam and Carol over at CCIM Tech, and you can also view any past archived webinars, a great resource for learning in the future. What we're going to do today is jump over into the REI Wise platform, which is provided to all CCIM designees as a free benefit. Anybody that is not registered, all you'd need to do is go to our homepage, which is reiwise.com. You can see in the top left-hand portion of your screen here, I've typed in reiwise.com. If you then put a / and STDB for Site to Do Business, this will take you to a landing page where you can register for your account for free. This is, again, a benefit provided to all designees. If you're a candidate, you can open up a landing page directly for candidates, which would be at the same spot, reiwise.com / candidate. This would allow you to access REI Wise with a special 20% discount from $4.98 down to $3.99. So that's how you guys can get started with the Power Broker software. Again, CCIM designees, this is all provided to you for free. So if you have not signed up, please go to reiwise.com, STDB, and do so, and you will have access to everything I'm showing you today. Okay. What we're doing is combining two separate valuations today. We are going to be going over an investment analysis and a lease analysis in combination to create a lease versus buy analysis within our Power Broker. And just to get an overview of this, this would be for a client that is obviously looking to purchase a building or to occupy that same building as a tenant. And you're going to show them the costs of each of those income streams over time in a branded report coming from your Power Broker solution. So let's just go ahead and jump right in and talk about how to produce this report. On our homepage, reiwise.com, on the top right-hand screen, there is 3 separate logins: the investment analysis, the commercial lease analysis, and your virtual secured deal rooms or your transaction centers. Now, you may want to jump into the lease analysis, you may want to jump into the investment analysis, or you're not sure which one to jump into because it's a little bit of both, but the lease versus buy analysis is held on the investment analysis platform. So you're going to want to click on that login page. You would then have your own email as your login ID. And again, if you don't have that information, you can always contact us. If you don't have your password, just go ahead and click request password, and you'll be sent an email with a new password. When you go ahead and enter in your password, it will log you in to the REI Wise platform. Now on my screen, and let me just make this a little bit bigger for everybody. Okay. On my screen, we have a new display. You guys may have never seen this before. This is a new manager that we have that shows us all of our different properties. We have a new dashboard with productivity tools, traffic reports, commissions reports. I'm doing a webinar on those on Thursday if you'd like to join us, all these new features that are coming in. But just so you know that that's there, this is not something different than your account. Also, you would have a CCIM label across the top here. Please note that I'm not a CCIM and this is just my account. So if it looks a little bit different, it's the same exact analytical tool. And where we're going to want to start off today is I'm going to open an existing property and show you a completed lease versus buy, and then we'll jump in on how to create it. So I'm opening up this industrial user, and it's for sale or for lease. So I'm going to open up that property, and this would be your typical screen. This is most likely what you all see when you log into your account. The general tab, financials, income and expense. And then once we start adding in information, that's going to populate our projections, our charts, our dashboard for an individual property. Now this is for a single property, okay? And our lease versus buy report is found on our proposals tab. The proposal tab is a summary of all the different reports that you can create for a single property, and this would be on an investment run. This would be a lease versus buy, a sale leaseback, a BOV. You have things such as your cover sheet, your property photos, custom proposals and reports, sales comps, rent comps, all that good stuff. Today we're not really interested in all of this. We're just looking down at the bottom in our module report section, and we're looking at our lease versus buy report. And this lease versus buy report is very specific to this endeavor and to this type of analysis. So I don't have anything checkmarked except for a cover sheet and a lease versus buy report. I'm going to hit preview and save, and we're going to get a sample report of what this is going to look like when it's done. So here I've got a cover page. I put in a couple bullet points, and I've got some photos. And then it comes in and provides us with a lease versus buy report. Now, if I blow this up, and we'll just take a look at this and go over a quick summary, what we're doing is we're comparing two net present values over time. One being if we're leasing the property, one being if we are purchasing the property and occupying it as our own tenant. Now, our key assumptions will be up on top, and it will have an analysis period, when it's going to start, when it's going to end, what you're going to purchase the building for today if you're buying it, and your discount rate. Now, when you're building the two different income streams, we're going to have some real basic level data that we're going to need to enter in. And if you think about it, one income stream would be if you're leasing this. You're going to come in, you're going to not have to put any money down because you're not purchasing the property, but you are in effect going to have to lease it back or lease the property, so you're paying a monthly rent or an annual rent with increases. Now, over time, that would be an income stream each individual year. If there were any additional lease costs, such as term increases, those will be included. And it will create an income stream over time to give you the total lease costs and then a net present value using the given discount rate. Now, your buy costs are a little bit different. If you're buying the property at an individual price today and financing it at some level, you would have a year zero cost, which would equal your down payment, or a month zero cost that would equal your down payment. And then every single year moving forward, you're going to have annual costs that equal to your debt service, plus any capital expenditures over time. But at the end of the 10-year analysis, to create this as an apples-to-apples assumption, or I'm sorry, not assumption, but analysis, we're going to need to have a cap and sell the property. So we're going to need to have a future value so that we can build a net proceeds and take advantage of the fact that you have ownership in the property. So it's important to note this at the front end because we are going to have a definitive time period, and we are going to need to have the lease payments running all the way through that time period. And through that time period on the buy side, we're going to need to purchase the building. We're going to need to have our carrying costs, and then we're going to need to actually have a reversion price and produce some net proceeds. Now, with those net proceeds, and on the lease side with our lease payments, there are tax implications. So we need to have our tax values and rates set up within the analysis too. But as you can see, it will then give us our key results. What are the costs of each of those individual income streams, puts them side by side for us, and as you can see in this example, the net present value of our buy cost is less than the net present value of our lease cost. So in this case, it's going to tell us that it's a benefit to purchase this building because over time it's in effect cheaper, and it's taken into account all the factors that we just discussed. Now, when we take a look down at the crossover reports, this is a little bit more elevated in just putting the numbers side by side, but it will give us 3 different crossover results. The year in which the annual lease costs exceed the buy costs, so that happens in year 2. And again, the buy costs are going to start out to be much bigger because we've got that down payment, right? But this tells us in which year the annual lease costs exceed the annual buy costs. So you already go over your costs in year 2. The year in which the cumulative lease costs exceed the cumulative buy cost would be in year 10. And again, that wouldn't just be the annual, it would be the cumulative. And then the year in which the NPV of lease costs exceed the NPV of buy costs. And again, that's in year 10. And as you can see here, the reason for that is because we're going to have a big reversion at the end, and you've got some net proceeds from the sale. So in this case, you could see that since it's in year 10, the buy option becomes a better option once you sell the property and unlock those net proceeds. So in this case, if we lost money on this building, it would probably be better to lease it. But since we are making money on the reversion in year 10, it becomes a better deal to buy this building. Now, that can be seen in a little bit more light in our annual appreciation required to reach the resale point of indifference. And the point of indifference on the resale would be a appreciation rate at which the property needs to grow so that it would still make sense to buy the asset. Okay, if these were apples to apples and the costs were exactly the same, a lease cost and the net present value of the lease cost and net present value of the buy cost, the annual appreciation required to reach the resale would be 0. But since we have a negative number here, it's telling us that over 10 years, this property can depreciate by 1.44%, and it's still a better deal to purchase this asset rather than to lease it. So if this value went up, if this was a positive number, say in the 3% range or the 4% range, it would be telling us that this property would need to appreciate by 3% to make it more beneficial to purchase the asset rather than to lease it. So this is a really good number because we can talk to our clients and say, well, what do we expect the market to do over the next 10 years? If we expect it to hit a rate of 1.44 depreciation, which I'm assuming most places probably will, then yes, it's a better option to buy this property. If that value were, say, a positive 3, geez, I don't know. In an industrial building, is it going to have 3% year-over-year appreciation? At that point, we may say, you know what, it might be better to actually lease this building because I don't believe the market is going to produce a 3% appreciation each year. And that's where you guys can add your expertise as the local market knowledge provider and come in and say, hey, look, these are the trends. This is where it's going. I think it will appreciate by this amount. I don't think it will appreciate at this amount, but the report will provide these different crossover results for you, and that'll be kind of the basis of the conversation. And when we were building these reports, we had in mind that this is going to be a very interactive report. You're not going to be doing a lease versus buy analysis and sending it out to 200 potential purchasers or lessees. You're going to be working with a client who's got a specific need, who's working on a specific building, and you're going to be putting in their tax implications. You're going to be putting in the different parameters of what they think they can lease the building for. So it's a very interactive report, and you can always come back and change these variables to get different results and kind of see where things are going at different lease rates and different appreciation rates. Okay, so that's our summary page. And the lease versus buy will show an additional report that actually breaks down the net present value analysis. And it'll do it before taxes and after taxes. But if we take a look at our first graph, it's the net present value analysis. And here you can see at purchasing, the net present value or cost is 1.7 million. So it costs less than the lease, which is 2129. And these numbers are exactly what I was talking about before. On the buy side, we've got the upfront down payment. On the lease side, we don't have an upfront down payment. On the buy side in year one, that's our debt service plus any capital expenses. On the lease side, it's our lease costs. And then it will show a differential on the right-hand side and put in a differential IRR for you. So in this case, the IRR of purchasing this over leasing it is a 12.82%. So if these become more apples to apples, or the lease costs, maybe we negotiated a better lease there and the cost went down, our differential IRR would obviously go down there as well, and it wouldn't be as advantageous to purchase rather than to lease. So you can see that there on that graph. Now, before and after tax cost analysis would then show the same individual results, but do it as an after-tax analysis. So let's go ahead and start entering in some of these and figure out how we can create one of these reports for an example property. So I'm going to close out of this, which is a report. And again, remember, we can find this report found on the lease versus buy check mark on the proposal tab and by hitting preview and save. But let's just go ahead and start over as if we were starting brand new. And I'm going to go to property, which is where we can create a brand new analysis. I'm going to click new, and I can type in any property name I want. So in this example, let's just call this Arizona Industrial Lease versus Buy. And we're going to make our default measure a annual rent per square foot per year. Okay? And I'm going to click OK. Now, in most cases, this is probably going to be an industrial building, maybe an office building that you're owner-occupying. Could be, a small medical facility, things like that. In this case, we're just going to use one-tenant industrial. And we want to build in our different income streams. So as we're going to build our income streams, let's think about those again real quickly. On the lease side, we've got lease payments, we've got increases. On the buy side, we've got to have a purchase price, the financing at which we're purchasing. That'll equal our carrying costs over time, our debt service. Then we need to have capital expenditures. And then we need to have net proceeds at the end of our analysis. So we need to set up the price now, the price in the future, the financing now, so that we have our carrying costs, and then any capital expenditures over time. So on the General tab, we've got an area to input two of these values. The first one is our purchase price, and this is what we're purchasing the building for today. Now, just to go ahead and put in some basic values, I will go ahead and what we're going to do is we're going to enter in a purchase price of, let's say, $5 million. And I'm just going to start out with that large number here, but I'm going to come back and actually change it in just a second. And this is where I'm going to turn to my friends out in Arizona. And can somebody in the crowd tell Camille a price per square foot for, let's say, a 50,000 square foot industrial building? Camille, if you're there, if you could please type in a price per square foot for an industrial building, 50,000 square feet, that a prospective tenant would be looking at paying. All right, so we got a 76 cents per square foot as our We'll make this a larger building just so that we've got some bigger numbers to deal with. So we've got 100,000 square feet, so you want to put in the square footage of the building here. Let's go over to the income tab, and we have one tenant, and this would be owner-user. And they're going to occupy all 100,000 square feet. And we're going to put in a base square foot of 0.76 cents per square foot per year. Now, as soon as we add this in, if we go over to our projections tab, we're going to see that we've got $76,000 as a lease payment per year. We don't have any increases. Well, Camille, I'm going to ask you guys again, what would now be a purchase price, or I'm sorry, a purchase cap rate on that type of deal, or a price per square foot on that type of deal so we can set the purchase price? Okay, so that was a monthly rate. I thought that was going to be a very, very inexpensive piece of property there. Camille was so nice to me and let me know that that was a monthly rate. So we're changing that from 76 cents a square foot per year to square foot per month. But again, please know you can change through any of these different rent allocations at any time. So we've got per square foot per year. If I take a look at my projections, it's now at $912,000, and that's going through a full 20-year analysis. And by the way, on every REI Wise report, it will build a analysis out 20 years, and then we can pick on how we want to report this. Okay, awesome. So Camille also just sent me that this property would most likely sell at an 8% cap rate. So when we're setting our price, I put in $5 million because we've got a projection of 76 cents a square foot per month. We have an NOI of $912,000. Right now, if we took a look at our financial indicators, we'd see that we are at a cap rate of 18.24, right? So how do I change that and get to a target rate of an 8 cap to set today's value or today's purchase price? I come back to the purchase price, and I've got a button right next to purchase price. I can click that button. It'll open up what we call our price analyzer. And because we've got a base rent, and let's say that that's a triple net rent, we can then put in a cap rate. It'll use our NOI, and our target value is 8%. I hit calculate, and our building's worth $11,000,004. Okay, I'm going to click OK, and now our price is directly into our analysis. If I go and take a look at our projections, I'm going to be able to see on our financial indicators that I'm now at an 8 cap. I'm also at an 8% cash on cash because I haven't added in any financing. So far what we've done, we've added in today's price, $11,400. We've gone to our income tab and we've added in our base rent for the first year, and it's on a triple net basis. Well, let's now talk about what's going to happen if we're a lessee over time, right? We would be paying 76 cents a square foot a month on the full 100,000 square feet. And let's say that this is a 10-year lease. So I want to put it out as a lease expiration, and we'll say that this expires January 31st, 2023, 10 years from now. And that would be if they occupied it in February. If they occupied this in March or April, you would be able to change these values, but we'll just go ahead and keep it in the same month right now. But now what happens to the 76 cents a month? Does it increase? We've got our term increases here, and I'll go ahead and place in a value of maybe a 2% base rent. Now you can add in your bumps as a percentage of the base, a monthly amount, yearly, or square foot for either or. Let's just go ahead for this example and put in a 2% increase. And it will run out for my full 10 years, and I go ahead and click Save. Now if I take another quick peek at my Projections tab, and I go down to my cash flow analysis or my operating data, we'll now see those increases taken into effect. So what we've done so far is we've built our lease cash flow analysis. Now I know that some people may be asking a question of, well, what about TIs? What about moving costs? What about these different values that I want to add in that are lease costs? Well, by definition, our TIs are going to be 100% paid for by the owner. If we start opening up negotiations for allowances paid to the tenant or the tenant paying for different TIs, that would also open up some negotiation on the purchase price. So what we like to do for an apples-to-apples analysis is we like to assume that you do not have any cost as a lessee on the TIs. And you have your lease rate and your increases. Now, if we want to take a look at the buy side, we have our price built on an 8 cap off of the lease rate that we had. Now down below, we've also got the future value. And remember, we need this for the reversion on the buy side analysis. And we need to set up our net proceeds. So what are going to be our costs of sale once we establish a value in the future? That's, let's say, well, for a large property like this, let's say 5%, maybe a 4-point fee on there plus an extra point for closing costs. We can value the property based on a couple different assumptions. We can either do it on an annual appreciation rate. Since we built our rent and our increases, we've got a fluctuating NOI over time. We can always use a cap rate in any future year and the given NOI in that year, or we can use a gross rent multiplier in any year based off of the scheduled GSI in that year. What we're going to do is we're going to select cap rate of NOI. That will allow me to put in a value here, and let's just go ahead and say it's going to remain at an 8 cap. What I've done is I've set up the reversion price for every single year within my 20-year projection. And just to fill this out, let's just put in a value of land, which will set up the, actually before we go into that, let me explain this a little bit more. So I've got an 8% reversion, or I'm sorry, 8% cap rate as a reversion value off of any given NOI. If I go back to my projections tab, I can see my resale analysis, and it will show me the price as we move forward in subsequent years, basing our price off of our 8 cap and the NOI in that year. So as our NOI is increasing by 2%, we're also getting that value. It's capping it out at an 8 cap and adding our value. So as you can see in this one, it's a pretty aggressive growth schedule because it's getting 2% and then capping that out at 8%. So it will also then build our net proceeds in every single year, which is a huge portion of our buy-side income stream. And as you can see here, we do allow for depreciation. So when we've got our depreciation, we need to set that up. That's again on the general tab as well. And if you add in the value of the land under the resale information, it will then deduct that value of land from the purchase price, get your improvement value, and depreciate that over time. So in this case, let's just say it's 20%. That's just roughly, what, $2,280,000, I think, if I did the quick math there, right? So here we've got a value of the land at $2,280,000. Our purchase price is $11,400. That would mean that our improvement value is the difference between the two, and that'll be depreciated over time. Okay, so let's go over what we've set up so far. We've got our purchase price today, our purchase price in the future, which is our 8% cap rate off of the NOI in any year. Let's go ahead and put in a discount rate of 8%. And we've set up our depreciation status. Also over on the income tab on the lease side, we've set up our square footage, our base rent, any increases over time. So going back to our different income streams and thinking about what we have left, on the lease side, we're pretty good. We've got the cost of a lease over 10 years. We're going to assume that there's no TIs. We're also going to assume that there's no additional cost other than the lease. This is an all-in lease rate. What about the buy side? Well, the buy side, we have to have our carrying cost, which is going to be our financing. And our financing can be put in on our financials tab. Now here we've got the option to do a couple different things. We can add in multiple loans. We can change each loan from a fixed rate to an interest only to a balloon, adjustable, or an assumption. And this lease versus buy analysis really comes into a play in a time like now where our interest rates are very, very low. So let's assume that we've got an SBA loan and the first loan is going to be an 80% loan. We'll go 20% down. It'll automatically give us our debt amount as of 80% of the purchase price, and we could put in the amortization. Let's say it's a 20-year AM, and let's put an interest rate of 4.5%. Now, if I go ahead and hit calculate, that's going to build out a fixed loan with a monthly payment of a monthly payment of $57,000 and change. Now, if we wanted to change this to interest only, we could simply select interest only and hit calculate, and now it will give us our monthly interest only payment. If we needed to change the interest rate, if we couldn't get 4.5, maybe it was 5.25, we hit calculate, it'll change our loan. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, we can usually get 20% on our, 80% LTV on our first loan, but we also want to add a second loan. So if we wanted to do that, we can add loan 2. And we could say that this is, again, another interest-only loan. And let's put in a value of 10%. 10% of 11,400,000 is, what is that? 1,140,000. Oops. And I could again put that under a 20-year AM, and the interest rate on this, let's say the second's a little bit higher, maybe at 6%. I go ahead and hit calculate. Now, if I go back to loan 1 and loan 2, I've now got 9 million and I've got 1,140,000. Now, I need to go ahead and change my down payment to 10%. There we go. And now my loan 1 is 9,120,000. My loan 2 is 11,140,000. This one's amortized over 20 at 6% interest rate. This one is 20 at 5.25. So you can have 2 loans going at the same time. You can even have 3 if you wanted to. Now, you also could change these to fixed rate, interest only, whatever it may be. But in today's financing world, and to purchase this, if there is some appreciation, it would be great to keep our costs low and then get our back-end appreciation. So again, just remember, when you're entering in the financing, you can have up to 3 loans. You can change them from fixed to interest only, balloon, adjustable, or even an assumption. And you can build your debt payments. And we can view those debt payments over on our projections tab. So if we take a look instead of our resale analysis at our loan analysis, now you can see I've got loan 1, and there's our principal payment 0, right, because it's interest only. We've got our interest payments, our total debt service. There's our beginning principal balance, right? We're not paying anything down. And then we've got our second loan, and it's running at the same exact time, and it's showing our principal payments, interest payments, all that good stuff. Now remember, if you wanted to print out any of these, they are available on our proposal tab down below, our projection reports. So you could see, our resale analysis or the loan analysis that we just completed. But those are standalone reports for any one of those projections on the projections tab. But now that we've got our price today, our financing set up, the financing provides our carrying costs over a period of time. We then also have our net proceeds because we've priced this out at an 8 cap in the future. The only thing left we would have for the cost of ownership would be some type of capital expenditures that you'd have to pay as an owner. Those can be entered on the expense tab. Okay, and down below our general expenditures, below the line, below the NOI, we've got capital expenditures. So I could go in and say that, yes, this property needs a new parking lot resurfacing. And that's going to cost us $50,000. And that's going to be in year 5, maybe, whatever it may be. That will hit the ownership side only. It will not hit the lease side. Again, remember, when we're entering in our lease numbers, we are assuming that that is without any TI costs, without any moving costs, and without costs of ownership. Okay, so when you're putting together your analysis, when you're talking with your client, make sure that you keep that in mind. And if you are going to be creating a scenario where there are costs of that size, they could always be negotiated out on a lower buy price or a higher buy price on the buy analysis. So to make that as easy as possible, we do not enter in anything but a lease rate for our lease analysis. Okay, so we're pretty much done here. We've entered in both income streams. We've got our lease rate, our increases. We've got our buy-side price, our buy-side reversion costs, and our net proceeds. We've also got any carrying costs and our capital expenditures through our financing and our capital expenses on the screen here. Now, the last thing we need to do is put in the tax implications for our client. And again, this is a great spot to engage the client. I never like to assume anything on my tax information. I try and stay away from any type of assumptions. So I make sure that I have the conversation with the client. What is your federal income tax rate? In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and put these all up, pretty darn high. And again, these can be whatever rates that you want to apply for your client. So have that conversation with your client. Again, we're across all different states here. I'm putting in 9% for California because I'm in California. But a big thing here would be if you're in a state that does not have state income tax, it'd be a great benefit. But these taxes will be they will have a huge impact on the net proceeds of sale with your federal income tax rate and your long-term capital gain, your annual cash flows with your income tax and your state income tax, and that would be on the buy side. But the analysis will automatically take into account all the implications of these taxes. The depreciation of the improvement would be shown in your cash flows on the buy side, and it will then be backed out in a recapture once you sell the property and have the net proceeds. So now that we've entered in all this information, let's go ahead and just see what this looks like. I can click on my proposal tab, and I'm going to go down to the very bottom, and I'm going to click lease versus buy, and let's see what we've produced. Okay, so the very first thing is we have our assumptions. We've got a 20-year analysis starting in February, ending in January of 2033. Now, if you remember in my example on the income tab, I only put in a 10-year lease. So the first thing I would want to do is change this to a 10-year analysis, because right now we've only got bumps going through our first 10-year lease. Now, if you had a client who's looking to lease it for 15 years or 20 years, you could leave this at 20 or change it to 15. How do we change that? Let me just close out of this. On our projection years, we can always change how long our reports will be. So if I only put in 10 years of income on my income tab, I want to make sure that my projection years reflect that same amount. And you could have this be any single number, 1 through 20. So I go ahead and I hit preview and save. Now we're going to see that our report has changed. It's only a 10-year report. Okay, and so now it's a 10-year analysis running through January of 2023, exactly how I set up my lease. I've got a discount rate of 8, and we're talking about a purchase price of $11,400, which is our 8 cap off our 76 cents a square foot per month, over 100,000 square feet. Okay, so what are our lease costs? Initial lease cost is 0. Year 1 annual lease cost is $510,000. So that would be our 76 cents a square foot per month over 100,000 square feet. This will also take in the benefit of writing off your lease payments against your taxes. So if you do put in that state tax and the federal income tax, it will deduct the tax benefits from your lease cost as a positive benefit. So that's why we don't see a value of 76 cents times 100,000 times 12 there, because it is taking in our positive benefits and positive tax implications of leasing the asset. It will show your final annual lease cost, so that's year 1, this would be year 10, so that shows how the increases have changed over time. Our total lease costs are just over $5 million, and our net present value is $3.7 million. Now on the buy side, we're putting $1.1 million up in year 0. Then we've got $207 in our annual buy costs. So right away you can see that our annual buy costs are much lower than our lease rate, and that's due to the fact that we've got that really good financing quote in there. We've got I think probably a blended rate of about 5.5%, which I know is even expensive money today for an SBA loan. But when our annual costs are this low, it's going to be pretty hard to beat an actual purchase price, or I'm sorry, a buy scenario. So as you can see, since we're building this, the lower the interest rate, obviously the better the buy scenario is going to be. But our final buy cost, again, that's going to be a positive number because that includes our reversion in year 10 at an 8 cap. And we'll go ahead and change some of these numbers so we can see them change. But our total buy cost would be $1.6 million, and our net present value of the buy cost is $1.8 million. So the year in which the annual lease costs exceed the annual buy cost, that's year 1. Year in which the cumulative lease costs exceed the cumulative buy cost. So if you were forced to sell before year 4, it would be better to lease. That crossover point shows you after year 4 is when it starts becoming a better deal to purchase this property. Year in which the NPV of lease cost exceeds the NPV of the buy cost. And that's on a year-to-year basis. This would be in year 5. It would be the net present value of those two income streams and take into account the reversion as well. Now, the resale value required for the point of indifference. So we're buying this property today at $11.4. You would need to sell the building for $5.9 to be able to make this a positive buy, to make it worthwhile to buy this. And from it going from 11.4 down to 5.9 is a negative 6.35 depreciation rate. So that'll change, if we had a lower reversion price. But this shows exactly what needs to happen for you to make a positive purchase here or a worthwhile purchase. So as long as the market doesn't depreciate by 6.35%, it's a better buy scenario than a lease scenario. Now let's look at the math of it. So we come down here, we can see the actual running costs. So our lease cost, $510. I mean, each year we're paying a substantial amount more. Plus, we've overcome our negative buy costs in year 0, probably by about year 4 here. But then we've got a real positive net proceeds of $1,113,886 in year 10 when we sell this. So if we play around with this, we can see how the different factors are going to change our analyses. And let's go ahead and start doing that. But as you can see, this is a very heavily buy-side analysis. We would definitely want to purchase this asset. Now, how do we change that, and what would be one of the main factors? Well, if we take a look at our reversion cost, what's happening is we're saying that we're still going to be able to sell this at an 8 cap. Well, what if we weren't able to sell it at an 8 cap? What if we were going to sell this at a 12 cap? Just by doing one number, our reversion cost goes way down, right? If we take a look at our resale analysis, now in years 1 through, geez, it doesn't even get up to the 11 million. So capping out at a 12 cap instead of capping out at an 8 cap, you can see that we never even reach our original purchase price of 11.4. So if we go back now to our proposals and rerun our report, we're going to see if it still makes sense. And actually it does. Let's go ahead and view this. You can see we're still paying $1,114,000. our costs are only $200 a year because of that cheap financing. But in year 10, we even have a negative cash flow from our proceeds, or a net loss from the sale, and the differential is still cheaper to buy this than to lease it. So even if you lose money on the asset, it's still better to buy this. So in this case, it's probably the financing, right? We've got a really cheap carrying costs on the buy side. You know, our rental rates probably aren't going to change all that much from 0.76 or 76 cents a square foot a month. You know, we're not going to see too drastic of a change there. But what about if our interest rates weren't as beneficial as they are now? If I come here to my loans, and let's just say our first loan, instead of 5 1/4, let's say that's a 7% loan. And our loan 2, let's say that was 7.5% or 8%, whatever you guys want to change it to, you can. But now we've got a much higher carrying cost on the buy side. So when I rerun my report, now we're going to see these carrying costs change. Oops, looks like my flash just died. Let's go ahead and see if it does. There we go. So now let's take a look at this. Now let's look first at our costs. And there we can see our buy costs have still gone up. But it's still actually, oh, look at that. It's almost darn near a differential of 0. So our cost here, it's actually more beneficial to lease the property than to buy the property, because we're at a cost of $4 million over time to buy this, and a cost to lease it of 3.7. Okay? And back on our summary page, I know here it says that we've got a negative 1.18 appreciation rate, or a 1% depreciation rate, that will still allow this to be a beneficial purchase. Well, remember, we set this at a 12 cap, and our reversion cost is below a 1.18. So our 12 cap is below this appreciation rate, which is making it a more beneficial lease than a buy. Okay, so those are the major factors that we can change for it to tell us which one is going to be more beneficial. But when it comes down to it, you're looking at these two net present values and then the crossover points that it's giving us. So in this case, it's obviously cheaper to lease the asset than to buy it. So just by looking at those three examples that we've done, we can see that the major factors are, you know, what's the buy side, how is it going to appreciate, and what are my financing terms? Now, you could also say on the lease side, well, I can negotiate a better lease than a 76 per square foot per month. Absolutely, that would change your lease side costs. If you could get that down, you know, maybe you could negotiate a 70 cents a square foot, then your total lease costs would go down. So if somebody's, you know, averse to buying and you're running this analysis, but it shows them that you know, buying is a better idea, you could then talk about, well, hey, we need to go back and negotiate a lower lease to make it a better option. Okay, so let's go ahead and review this one more time, just for a real short overview of what you need on the lease versus buy analysis. On the lease side, you want to go directly to the income tab and you want to put in your lease. Here we've got our base rent and we've got our increases. Okay, so that's going to set up our lease carrying costs. Now on the buy side, we need our purchase price, our resale price, and here I've got it at a cap of 12%. We need our financing, which I've got on two different loans, a 80% loan and a 10% loan, so a cumulative of a 90% LTV. We've blended the rates in there together. We've got kind of a high rate in there now, but if you guys put in today's rates, I'm sure most would be a positive purchase. And then we need to also put in any capital expenditures. And that would set up all of our carrying costs and our entry and exit costs as a purchaser. Now on both of them, you want to remember to also put in your tax information. Once you've entered that input in, all you need to do is go to the Proposal tab, check mark lease versus buy. There's nothing else you need to do, and you can hit preview and save and have your report. We've got a question here. Reads, how does the discount rate affect the analysis? What is the real-world discount rate based on? I'm using a sample of 8%, but again, that's a question you want to ask your client. Of course, the discount rate will be different for each and every client. The cost of money per different client can be different. I always use an example of a large company like Coca-Cola would have a much higher discount rate than a mom and pop, maybe a textile manufacturing company that's running, and that's just going to change the value of how much you're discounting this over time. And again, that would mean your upfront cost is more expensive to a larger company than a small company. And so you want to have that discussion with your client. Always ask them again what their discount rate would be and what they would want to use. But if you want to see the impact of it, let's go ahead and just change our discount rate. Oops. If I were to increase this, say, to 15%, let's see what it tells us now. Okay. So now it says it needs to appreciate more, right? Before it needed to appreciate at a negative number or depreciate, and we'd still be fine. With the higher discount rate, because we're putting a lump sum as far as our down payment up front, and our cost is higher, right? Our discount rate is higher. That is a negative impact on the buy side. So the higher the discount rate, the more impact it's going to have on the buy side cost, and therefore be better on the lease cost. Okay? And it's just going to change that overall net present value, because as you use the net present value over time, you need to discount that time, or I'm sorry, that value over time. But again, I would ask your client, very much ask your client for that number.
The organizer has ended the session, and this call will be disconnected. Goodbye.